I think that 30 minutes for the presentation and the discussion is fine. So if you want, I will let you know when there are 5 minutes left. Okay?
My name is Dario Dell'Osa, and with Ezio Ritrovato we are talking about entrepreneurial migration and industrial culture in the 19th century southern Italy. This work aims at examining the industrialization process of 19th century southern Italy as differentiated by production sectors and geographical areas, interpreted in the light of the action and influence of foreign entrepreneurship on the transformation of cultural, environmental and technological contexts, which later become the humus for industrialization at the end of local entrepreneurs. The analysis will focus on the possible link between the settlement of foreign entrepreneurial communities in the area still at the proto-industrial development stage and the subsequent emergence of a new economic approach, which gave rise to a process of industrialization. The existence of an interconnection between the two phenomena will be discussed in order to understand how, in the course of the 19th century, Campania, Apulia and Sicily, unlike other southern regions, once included in the Kingdom of Naples, showed a transformation in their productive structure, as well as the affirmation of an industrial culture characterized by an abundance of initiatives and by an inclination to business risk hitherto unknown to local entrepreneurs. The slow progress of some regions of southern Italy with regards to the first steps of industrialization in the course of the 19th century has been the object of many prevalently descriptive studies. A more detailed and specific historiographical focus has been given to the role of foreign capital and entrepreneurship in either starting or speeding up industrialization in some regions or sub-areas of southern Italy in the course of the 19th century. Almost always true, these studies have focused on the description of the course of entrepreneurial migration, on the economic motivations at the basis of such migration to Italy and southern Italy, on the solidity of the growths and activities of foreign entrepreneurs, on their social relationships and on their different levels of integration with local communities. As scarcely considered, I thought no less relevant aspect for the understanding of the effects of the entrepreneurial migration in 19th century southern Italy is the dissemination of managerial modus operandi, organizational models and multiple initiatives at the end of foreign entrepreneurs that affected and reshaped the economic layout of local production communities. Furthermore, the success of foreign industrial initiatives fostered immigrative processes also based on the acquisition of technical skills and of specialized economic training, e.g. foreign languages, international trade laws, trade habits that foreign entrepreneurs already possessed and put to use, thus outclassing local operators. So, e.g. some families of small local textile producers, especially around Naples and Salerno, in order to achieve an industrial-oriented business development, decided to send their children to study in foreign schools, thus guaranteeing an adequate technical training to future textile entrepreneurs. When overcoming the technical and scientific gap through independent training courses become impractical, the process of dissemination of industrial practices turns towards either learning on the field in foreigners-owned factories or on replicating successful industrial experiences. In the former case, the typical path of new southern industrialists in either working within companies or employed by foreign entrepreneurs to then spin off and set up their own industry, similar to those where they learn by the trade. On the other hand, the imitative process, being a typical Grecian-Cronian way of filling the gap in industrial development, plays a fundamental role in the modernization of southern entrepreneurship, particularly with regards to the introduction of process innovations. Actually, choosing to start production activities similar to those established by foreign industrialists implied that the local operators gave up deeply rooted pre-industrial forms of production to adopt corporate organizational models and, above all, the technological innovations introduced by foreign industrialists. For the reason, it was only following the extraordinary success of the new olive oil production systems imported to Apulia and to the whole continental south by Provenza Chiaravanà that olive growers and olive oil producers were persuaded to use iron hydraulic presses and new Provençal-style mills. In the slide you can see the old type of mills with human and animal power, and the old type of mills with human and animal power, and the new type of mills with hydraulic power, with hydraulic presses to produce olive oil. An instance following a similar path, foreigners owned the industry in the productive sectors of textiles and the mechanics during the 19th century played the role of either a training milieu or an entrepreneurial example for local operators. An instance of this is the wool and cotton industry in Campania, where a large community of foreign textile manufacturers, mainly from Switzerland, gathered since the early years of 19th century. The custom protection by the French first and by the Bourbons later, the availability of raw materials, namely cotton, the presence of rivers which guaranteed the hydraulic energy necessary for spinning machining and mechanic looms, as well as the wide availability of cheap labor, were the main factors leading to such concentration of foreign companies. We can see in this slide two wool mills in the two wool plants in the Liri Valley, and two cotton plants for the production of textile or cotton textile in Salerno. We can see that in the Liri Valley the plants were built over the rivers that flow under the mills in order to be used to let the plant use the water for the works. So such first settlements boosted the subsequent creation of many textile mills owned by industrialists from Salerno and Caserta. Moreover, in the mid-50s, the acquisition of new skills, also in the mechanic sector, by local operators caused the market for wool industry machinery, which until then had been the exclusivity of the factory owned by the Frenchman Enrico Mignot, to be inherited by three Campania-based companies. Also in the case of the engineering industry in Campania, custom protection favored the settlements of foreign entrepreneurs, who were joined by local industries. The foreign textile and engineering industry of the Napolitan area also played an important role in Apulia. As a matter of fact, as in a sort of interregional diaspora, the transfer from Naples or Salerno to Bari was the common denominator of all the industrial initiatives taken in Apulia by Swiss, Austrian and Germans. In the decades preceding the unification of Italy, some textile industrialists moved from Naples and Salerno to Bari. Similarly, Guglielmo Lindemann, a mechanical engineer born in Luxstadt in Prussia, and the owner of a large foundry with an exert engineering factory, moved from Salerno to Bari in 1850, and it was Francesco de Blasio, a former worker of Lindemann's, who in 1885 founded a new mechanic industry, thus managing to compete with his former master with a large factory where about 250 workers were employed. The same happened in the textile and agro-industrial sector with the production of sulfide oil and soaps. Starting in the last years of 18th century, a remarkable entrepreneurial activity by British merchants and handymen was recorded in Sicily. The British were particularly dedicated to the processing of agricultural products, from wine-making establishments to the production of licorice paste, citrus extract and cream of tartar. Unlike in Campania and especially in Apulia, the foreign-owned productive activities in Sicily were distributed through the various provinces, although with a larger concentration in Palermo. The production of Marsala liquor wine, which was started in 1773 by Giovanni Woodhouse, an Englishman, caused several local entrepreneurs to replicate the experience of the British founding new wine production establishment. The most important one being undoubtedly Vincenzo Florio, a man with many entrepreneurial interests, who in 1833 had built his own factory in Marsala. Also, the mining industry, linked to the production of sulfur and mostly destined for export, played a very important role in Sicily. Foreign entrepreneurs, mostly English and French, invested in management of sulfur springs, introducing the mining technologies developed in England and based on the use of steam engines. In addition, mechanical weaving machines were installed by foreigners in Palermo and in Catania. However, the most important center for cotton weaving in Sicily was Messina, due to the British-owned mills of three Englishmen, establishment in 1830s, together with other local entrepreneurs, who soon followed their example. Last, in 1881, thanks to a local power company, Catania was the first Sicilian city to employ electricity for public lighting, although it had been the major center of Sicilian city industry for quite some time due to the widespread utilization of modern jacquard looms. We have seen how, in the pre-unification period, foreign industrial activities in southern Italy were concentrated in some areas characterized by favorable environmental conditions. Our goal is to evaluate the effects of such foreign entrepreneurial presence and its contribution to the indigenous industrialization of southern Italy. Therefore, we will use some development indicators of the industrial sector, resorting in some cases to the results of studies carried out in the last decades. This data unanimously confirm how the territories where the greatest industrial development occurred in the decades astride the 19th and the 20th century, characterized by a considerable growth of the local entrepreneurial component, are the very same regions or provinces toward which migration and foreign industrial settlements were directed in the pre-unitary period. Using the data from the industrial statistics of Italian provinces, as surveyed between 1885 and 1895, it is possible to know the number and the distribution by type of production of the industries present in the southern regions of Italy. This indicator shows the prevalently concentration of the industries operating in the south of Italy in the early 1890s, in Campania, Sicily and Apulia. Significantly, the greatest incidence pertains to some productive sectors, such as mechanics and chemistry, which are typical of a more modern stage of industrialization, with a particular relevance in Sicily, due to the high presence of mining industries. The legacy of the original industrialization started in Campania, Sicily and Apulia by foreign entrepreneurs in the previous century was still evident in the early decades of the 20th century in the large percentage of people employed in the industrial sector. Based on the processing of the MIC and ISTAT data from the 1911, 1927 and 1937 industrial censuses, as carried out by Cainelli Stampini, the primacy of Campania, Sicily and Apulia appears, together with the wide gap separating these regions from other regions from the south. Surveys on the number of industrial enterprises in 1911 appear to be substantially in line with the number of people employed in the industrial sector. In this case, the fact that Campania ranks second is explained by the higher average size of companies which were less numerous than in Sicily, but they were bigger. In the data concerning the regional per capita income of the industrial sector, are taken into account the values recorded by Emanuele Felice, partially confirm the theories developed so far. Actually, the 1911 values of Campania and Sicily essentially mirror those regarding employment in the manufacturing sector, although Calabria exceeds Apulia, albeit slightly. This latter value is explained by taking into account the larger number of the Apulian versus Calabrian population and of the particular composition of the Calabrian manufacturing sector, with many little silk industries. If we look at the early years of the 20th century, when the contribution of local entrepreneurs is more important, the data related to the 1911 per capita income of southern industry show the clear-cut prevalence of three leading regions. Data provided by Fenaltea and Felice are reported specifying that while Fenaltea related the product of industry with the employment data derived from population censuses without considering the elements related to the productivity per employee, Felice also took into account the productivity of the workforce, measured through the value of wages per employee. In relation to the per capita profitability in the industrial sector, the leadership of Campania compared to the other southern regions is also demonstrated by the 1911 data. Sicily shows an increase, thus confirming the good profitability of its industrial sector, while the Apulian industry seems to have clearly exceeded the performance of the Calabria manufacturing sector. The higher levels of industrialization attained in the early 20th century by the two regions affected by entrepreneurial migration during the first half of the 19th century find a further immediately significant confirmation in the supply of steam engines and boiler. Once again, compared to Sicily, Campania shows a more technological and capital-intensive connotation of its industrial sector in associating a lower number of boilers and engines with a higher total power implemented. A final confirmation to the thesis supported so far comes from an in-depth analysis at the provincial level, as well as from data pertaining to the added value of industry. The primacy of Campania, Sicily and Apulia is articulated according to the values of individual provinces and shows that in intra-regional rankings, it is the very provinces where foreign entrepreneurs have settled that achieved the best results in the decades astride the 19th and 20th centuries, namely Naples, Caserta and Salerno in Campania, Bari, the only one in Apulia because it was the only Apulian province of settlement of entrepreneurial migrations, Palermo, Messina and Catania in Sicily. Statistical evidence concerning the industrialization level of southern Italy astride the late 19th century and the early decades of the 20th century testifies the primacy of those regions toward which foreign entrepreneur migration had been directed in the course of the 19th century. If the differentiation were to be made, German and English entrepreneurs would be given the role of makers of the transition from the sectors of the early industrial revolution that were marked by a greater presence of French and Swiss to the capital-intensive sector of the second industrial revolution. Using the reading key of industrial policy, instead, foreign companies in southern Italy implemented a marked import substitution strategy that, at least until the unification of Italy, resulted in a market largely safeguarded by the borders. Protectionist tariffs. Foreign entrepreneurs would also be said to have unwittingly anticipated a throw on a more limited territorial dimension and size. The industrialization policies later promoted by Minister Francesco Saverio Nitti to favor the economic and social development of southern Italy. The aspect on which a more detailed analysis was focused through concerns the change in production structures brought about by foreign industrial initiatives and, even more, the change in the prevailing economic culture in the areas, either regions or provinces, where such initiatives were mostly concentrated. We have seen how industrial statistics for these areas indicate the evident transformation of the economic structure and then, therefore, the transition from a predominantly agricultural society to a more industrial-oriented society. Cultural change, although less perceptible empirically, is no less important in the evaluation of the effects of the entrepreneurial migration. It is a different propensity to business risk, the acquisition of complex organizational models which are typical of industrial activities, which southern entrepreneurs have so far deeply mistrusted. Generally speaking, such mistrust has caused the southern merchant bourgeoisie to prefer the secure margins of a commercial intermediation over the more uncertain profits of innovative industrial initiatives. That is also why the dynamism and industrial initiatives of foreign gained ground quickly in an almost total lack of competition. French and English entrepreneurs, followed by Swiss and Germans, arrived to Campania, Apulia and Sicily, starting in the early 19th century, and filled sectoral gaps, occupied economic space with the perspective of enormous profits. At the same time, however, they promoted the dissemination of technical skills and the introduction of different forms of business and organizational models. They modified the working habits of the population that was accustomed to the slow cyclical nature of agriculture, as well as the mentality of local entrepreneurs in relation to investment risk and profitability. With the approach of the First World War, foreign industries left those areas of southern Italy, ending a process of entrepreneurial disengagement that had started at the end of the 19th century. In the years prior to the beginning of the conflict, the Austrian and the German communities disappeared altogether, although the members who were indicated as enemy subjects might have continued to live in Italy by handing over the management of their company to a sindacatore, a sort of commissioner appointed by the Italian government. Their legacy must not be sought in the material value of disused factories and plants, but rather in the dissemination of a new industrial culture, which gave origin to a growing interest of southern entrepreneurs towards capital-intensive productive activities, which, starting from the second half of the 19th century, boosted the indigenous industrialization process in southern Italy. Thank you, and sorry for my English.
Okay, would you like to discuss immediately, or we have at the end? Okay, thank you very much. And so now we have Fiammetta Fanizza.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. 25. Yes, okay. Thank you very much. Now we jump into a problem, into the description of a phenomenon that is linked to the migration flow and the migration problem that we are talking about since yesterday. Actually, I can start with the answer to the two questions. Sorry, but I dislike it all PowerPoint, but I do it, I don't know why. And the questions are, is there any competition between immigrants and native? Do illegal working immigrants affect wage, employment, or natives? I don't know. The professor has gone, maybe, but this, the discussant, the panel before, yes. This is the questions for the first, the first and the second. The answer is yes. The third one is, it depends. Okay. Now let's start on my presentation. I'm an urban sociologist, and my interest is not really linked to the migration. Start with the development of the land and how the presence of migration transform the landscape. During a lot of since less than 10 years, I been involved in many research, and now me and some colleagues are very paying a lot of attention about the problem of exploitation of migrant workers and the connection between the legal migration and how migrants, legal ones, are very interesting for game master. And this game master we can call caporale. I want to precise that what I'm going to tell you, it's not only the result of a sociological observation or sociological research, but I try to interact with, of course, legal data and also with other kind of theoretical sensibility. And this is the really motivation, because I'm here, and I was very glad to be here with you. So the problem is the caporalato and the phenomenon of the globalization of the farmland. We can understand the problem of migrant illegal worker if we don't define what the globalization of the farmland is. So I can assert that the entire process of growing, harvesting, and producing agricultural products is founded about the exploitation of manual labor. In Italy, and in particular in country region southern region, and we can think to Sicilia, Puglia, Calabria, but also in the middle of Italy, for example, Lazio, and of course also in the north of Italy, for example in Trentino, where I live for personal condition, and also in Piemonte. The problem of caporalato is present because the game master called caporali imposed a lot of rules that I summarized in this slide. They select and hire agricultural laborer, establish the number of hours in a workday and the responding wage for a day laborer, negotiate production rules with agriculturists and consequently take control of commercial farms, decide how much to produce and how to distribute the productive in wholesale market, and stipulate agreements with the mass market retail. This is the problem that we can focus if we want to understand really how the migrant problem is so difficult to solve and difficult to have the right view about this problem. Since caporali power is by now so consolidated and ingrained that the alimentary industry are subject to their decision, it's now more than ever advantage to be aware of this phenomenon and understand it in light of the commercial process caused by the so-called globalization of the land. This is, I can argue that this is the problem, and this is the main problem who involve not only people who live in agricultural regions, but involve people who need food. And when I tell this need food, I was thinking to people that are Italian, but to people that are Australian, because if someone uses tomato sauce, for example, the problem is the same. The mass market retailers need the gag master organization. That is not what the rhetorical image can suggest, but they improve the image and they enforce the capacity, the ability to be really spread and to be really involved in product in agriculture and alimentary, in the business linked to the food and agricultural market. What is the phenomenon of the globalization of the land? Is we can identify it with the morphological restructuring of rural and productive area, dictated by the expansion of the chains belonging to the the mass market retail. If the Italian farmlands in both northern and southern Italy have for years been implemented radical change that link the agro-industry with the globalized system of capitalistic accumulation. Essentially, this change involved the following: large infrastructural endowment, the development of service for the organization of local rural system, and of course the demographic movement. So the first answer is the illegal worker interfere, affect, yes, of course, because now I can say that the problem of migrant coming to be relevant also for native people. If I look in my territory, that is the province of Foggia, that is the most agricultural area in Italy and the mondial leader of not only tomato fields but also a lot of vegetable, cabbage, and I visit some factory. The workers are very it's difficult to find regular job. Also, when we are native. For example, women are forced to stay 12 a day for example, less than 1,000 euros. So the first answer is yes. But I want to be precise. Who is involved in the pickup of agricultural products are not irregular. Most of them are regular migrants because the caporali, the gangmaster, don't risk. They are able to control, and the possibility to face this problem with the law is a sort of losing game, because gangmasters have the possibility to form some consortium of enterprise, and they overpass the problem of loyalty. Okay, what is the backdrop of the globalization of the farmland? This one, the oppressed immigrants subjected to exploitation and violence, the development of new form of farmer without land as the protagonist of transnational migration. Let me be sociologist. May I? Yes. And this problem of the farmers without land is not only a sum of romantic aspiration. It's not painting a picture, but it's a problem because the concept of rural culture, the concept of local development is disappearing, because if the farmers are not the landowner, the problem is that this is the land. This is the land, and this is the condition of many, one of the ghetto that are disseminated in our region. This picture is from Gran Ghetto di Rignano. It is a big slums in the countryside of Foggia, but the same is Rosarno or other countries. If you ask me, but in Trentino is because the weather. But believe me, to pick up an apple and to have the same apple on my table and on the table of another people who is living in Malmo, for example, we need something that guarantee the best quality, both the best quality, so the organization must be precise. And this, to be precise, they need people who can do it without any kind of questions, without any kind of quarrel. And to have a quarrel, this condition is the best one, because they are deprived of any kind of human rights. Yesterday morning we are talking about human rights with you, and I think that this is a really problem to a complex situation in which the rights is linked with the development of the market and the rules of the market. Okay. So, caporalato forced to accept dwelling condition and divided up according to ethnicity and religious beliefs, the immigrants are introduced into the productive mechanism of the globalization of the farmer. The connection between production center and consumption center subjugate every management philosophy, become the exclusive and the, let me say, ontological goal. The economic dogma in the agricultural market is the greatest profit at the lower possible cost. The goal of maximizing profit and reducing costs depends on the availability of flexible manual labor. that is on call, so to speak. The available manual labor is guaranteed by the contingents of immigrants that arrive by sea from Africa and Asia. Migratory flux assume a crucial role for the entire agricultural production chain. So, obviously, any kind of solution about migration problem as a big part of rhetorical speech, because everybody knows that without migrants, a great part of market, a great part of business is impossible to do. So, how can we react? This is the question. So the questions are that competition is the dog, the main rule, and the illegal effect, yes, are very, very much, because the value of the level is not more, it's not more value. What I want to tell you about two experiences that are only an example of what I can define the multicultural welfare that may be local better than national. And the will is to suggest to policy a way or a point of view, because the big policy and, for example, the transnational agreement are, yes, a step, but not the solution. Because what happened in the land, in the territory, is more relevant than what happened in the international agreement. So, even if the approach of Italian public policy on migration is still characterized by a transitory and short-term nature, the examination of the logic that regulates the segregation system of the immigrants' residents suggests to invest in multicultural generative welfare projects, useful both to migrants and to native population. In order to renew the functional welfare, we can consider two interrelated questions. Management of ethnic and cultural diversity on the part of local government, and then a comprehensive and sweeping concept of immigration in local policy. This is what I argue. We can change the system of welfare, not only for migrants, because we need a pact with migrants. We have to change the mentality of welfare, the approach to welfare that need a different view, really comprehensive of the up-to-date condition in the world. Yesterday I was making questions about the possibility to consider the flow instead of the quantity. But I listen every time politician who speaks about how many people are in Italy now. It's not relevant, because it's not how many they are, but how they are involved in what. I can say that if they are less, but they are relevant for some economic sectors, it's not really important if they are less or more. The problem is the structure of our long-term policy. And so I think that a welfare system could help people and native and migrants, also because after many years of project of integration, inclusion, we are always in the same step. Today, the colleague of Hungarian was speaking about cognitive dissonance. I think that after 20 years of migration in Italy, the cognitive dissonance is large, and not we are not able to change our view and to the concept of solidarity, because this is not a solidary world, so we can try to find a system of welfare that can help us. I can show you only two examples. The first is this social business in Sicily, in the province of Catania. The regional government support these two biological companies, Permafab and Sicilia Integra, that are both the same. The different is the owner. The key trend of this interaction between farm, city council and non-profit association together with University of Catania. I can say that the characteristic element of this experience is that they put together in the same destiny the unemployed, Sicilian unemployed with migrants, and they put them together after a skill monitoring, because we need to know what migrants are able to do. We can't use migrants like a quote, but we have to understand what they are able to do. For example, many times we talk about the problem of fragile or vulnerable territory. Why don't we invest in the possibility to the repopulation with the effort of migrants? That can, not because it's important a theoretical multicultural society, but because we need, because we have a problem not only about heritage, but about economy, because we are not in a situation of particular rich, we are not a rich country, we have a problem. So this is the first one, and in this slide I can summarize what is the main goal of these social, of these companies. They are, yes, an experiment. They try to be emulated, and they represent, in my opinion, a good example of work integration in work. Okay. The other one is the Apulian Multicultural Action Plan. This has been signed in the February of 2018. And the new aspect is that for the first time the problem of migrant is combined with the disadvantaged social classes. So the problem of multicultural society is approached with a view in which who is vulnerable must need help, and this help is not done, but is a sort of self-empowerment. For example, the first is the right to be a dignity, the right to have a dignity house, and then to support some business activity. And this is important because each city council must be involved. Of course, this Apulian Multicultural Action Plan is in training, and really, I can say if it will be good or not. But I think that it put the line on a way that may be better than other things that now we can assert are not successful. Thank you.
So, before the discussion, we have the last presentation of this first part of the session, Patrizia Battilani and Francesca Paoli, with Chinese immigrants.
Well, this paper is part of a larger research on the history of Chinese community in Italy. And Chinese community in the UK. And the aim is to answer to this question, and that is connected with the huge literature on the inclusion of migrants in the destination countries. And the point is that is if migrants communities coming from the same country share the same features everywhere, or if they tend to adapt their uses, their habits to the culture of the destination country. And that's why we decided to compare two countries that from the economic point of view and also from the social point of view are very different, as Italy and the UK. So we try to see if migrant entrepreneurs operate their business according to the culture, the mentality prevailing in the country of destination or in the country of origin. And the other point is if the economic integration can contribute to the social integration too. And so, just to give you a general framework about the two different migration fluxes in the UK and in Italy, you can see from this data that there is a strong difference both in terms of size and also in terms of timing. In the UK, the immigration fluxes started earlier and became huge after the Second World War. On the contrary, the Chinese migration to Italy grew little by little over time. And apart from these huge difference in timing and size, the two countries share also some features. First of all, the fact that before 1939, both the Chinese community in the UK and in Italy came from mainland China. And they came more or less from the same provinces. And it was led by male immigrants, and in both countries, these immigrants were involved in specific, selective business. And they were street vendors, and they produced leather bags in Italy, and above all in the area of Milan and Bologna. And they specialized in seafaring, laundries and restaurants in England, and above all in the area of London. And another point that was common to the two communities is the fact that before the Second World War, most of migrants were politically aligned with the Kuomintang, and in both countries. Then, of course, things changed after the Second World War, because even if the new migration, even if the migration chain stimulated the arrival above all in Italy of the people that were part of the family of people that had migrated before, there was a change in the political attitude and the political relations of the two generations of migrants. Anyway, for Italy we focused above all on the case of Bologna. Bologna wasn't the main destination